And welcome to episode 5 of Beyond the Pixel. We're dropping in hot into this one with Luis Fernando Sandrin, technical designer, and digital artist Ken Ha. 100 podcasts dropped down, Ken. We're the only ones that survived.
You gotta be the last man standing. All right, how's it going, man?
I'm doing good. I'm living. I'm surviving day by day, hour by hour. And yourself?
Pretty good. Have you heard of this new game that's dropped, Hyperscape?
Yes, but only because you told me about it.
Yeah, it's like they just dropped a tech demo / I guess alpha or beta on Twitch. New Battle Royale with kind of a Quake-ish like feel to it.
Oh.
So that's what kind of inspired today's topic for me.
Okay.
You know, I actually wanted to talk about this for a while, but then we had some other topics that I'd rather go first. But now I want to go through a bit of like the history of Battle Royales because I find it kind of interesting. It's the first time, well, not the first time, but I find it quite rare in the gaming industry to see a new genre appear, like a specifically pretty fresh genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think of the FPS genre in general, there hasn't been a new game mode that's specifically interesting or that's worked out. Like there's always deathmatch, some sort of team deathmatch, or possibly with a bit of a variant with Counter-Strike and Plant the Bomb. But even then, that's kind of like a deathmatch plus one objective, right? So it was kind of really interesting to me to see like when Battle Royales first started to come on to the scene. Do you remember what's the earliest iteration of a Battle Royale game that you can kind of think of?
Does DayZ count?
I do think it. I do think it counts actually.
Okay.
It's actually a part of what I wanted to discuss. It's kind of good that you said that. So do you want to pull up my little bit
DayZ.
Yeah, PlayerUnknown's DayZ. Do you want to pull up the little slides that I've made here?
Absolutely. That is not what you wanted to see. I don't know what that is actually, to be honest.
What's your playlist?
Yeah, I don't know why it appeared though. All right, there we go.
All right,
There's your
so
slideshow.
this is just obviously a little summary of some of the current Battle Royales that's going on. So I guess the first thing that we should talk about, if we were going to talk about Battle Royales, is like what defines a Battle Royale. I'm curious. What do you think it kind of is? What do you think is in a Battle Royale?
Well, Ken, as a game designer, we're very well trained in how we define Battle Royales.
Is there actually like a very specific definition?
I think at this point it's gotten a little bit loosely, but the key components I would say is you have a large player count, a large map that is gradually constrained over time, and there can only be one winner.
Yeah. Let's go to my next slide. That's definitely one side of it. I think there's a few other kind of key components that is kind of come up with Battle Royales, and I'll talk about them here. So yeah, like having a large player group, it's almost like a massively multiplayer online game in terms of the amount of people in the one server. So between 60 and 100 is your typical kind of range. I would also say that looting is kind of an integral part of the Battle Royale system right now. There's like no Battle Royale there that you have a set load up like in Battlefront or something like that.
I believe Warzone.
Warzone has partially, but then you still load out mostly in the game. I think
see.
you have preferences in terms of how your abilities or equipment is loaded. But you still find guns, you find money to buy guns, which it's a slightly different system. But ultimately there's still kind of looting. And then the shrinking zone obviously is kind of integral. So did you know that there is a bit of cinema history of Battle Royales before our DayZ and PUBGs came into play?
Yes, but pretend I did not.
Well, I'm curious, what is I think if you go to the next slide, the earliest iteration that, like, the most recent and obvious is the Hunger Games, right? Like, that's huge, super popular.
But little did they know, it's actually very inspired by Stone Cold Steve Austin's The Condemned.
Are you serious?
In which a group of criminals are dropped into an island and they have to murder a bunch of other criminals in order to get out alive.
Really? Wow, you heard it here. I didn't even know Stone Cold Steve Austin produced movies.
I think he just stars in it. I'm not sure what other directorial or production roles he had.
But you know, the Hunger Games, obviously, it stars Kat, and she's put into this arena very similar to like Fortnite or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier than that, do you know the original cinema source of this concept?
Yeah, Japan's darling, Battle Royale.
Yes. Let's go to the next page. Obviously, by the name. I don't know. This movie is a cult classic. Have you watched this movie before games like Fortnite and stuff came out?
I still have not watched it.
You haven't watched it?
No.
Oh my goodness. It's
if you can believe it.
You know, we should do a movie review on this one movie cuz
it's
not like it's I wouldn't say it's like your Emmy award-winning Parasite level of cinema that we're talking about here.
All right.
But it's so fascinating even when it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it also spawned the career of someone who would eventually be in the Kill Bill movies with Quentin Tarantino. You see on the bottom right.
On the bottom right, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I can't remember what her character's name is in Kill Bill, but she's one of the crazy 88, I believe.
Yeah, she's the one that has the very big ball and chain.
The ball and chain, yeah. So to give you a little summary of what the movie is, because you haven't seen it yet, a bit of a spoiler, but you guys should definitely watch this regardless if you hear the story, because it's kind of crazy. Let me pull it up here. Okay, so the premise of the movie is Japan is going through kind of similar to their post-World War II era struggles, where there was a lot of, there was an economic depression. So the story is kind of set in that type of universe. But also in this story, Japan has, for some reason, a massive countrywide problem with teenagers. Like, they're just getting super unruly and causing a lot of destruction in the city. Yeah. And so, of course, the logical solution to them is to put them all in this yearly battle royale where they take a bunch of unsuspecting teenagers, they gas them when they were supposed to go on a field trip, throw them onto this island, and then it's so much like a game, it's ridiculous. They each give them a bag which has a random weapon in it. So they get a loot box backpack. Some people get it's so unfair too, and which speaks totally to the battle royale genre, because the RNG in battle royales is so silly. One kid gets a gun, and some other kid gets a band-aid, and another kid gets a whistle or something. So it's completely
a band-aid,
unfair.
Just a single band-aid,
or a medical pack, right?
Oh,
a little medical pack. So everyone gets these kind of wild weapons, and they get sent out one by one. And so it's it's almost like dropping out of the bus, but essentially they get their own little bit of air time to go out and hide and stuff. And so the whole thing was that they would be wearing these collars that would explode, like they're bomb collars. And the rule was you have 3 days, and if you weren't the last person surviving, everyone on the island's collars would explode and killing everyone. So you had to kill, the idea was that you had to be the last person standing of the collars. And there were also these danger zones on the island. They were given this map. And
danger zone.
These bullhorns around the island that would kind of signal if they were in a danger zone. And then anyone within the danger zone during a certain hour would have their collars explode. So hence the idea of the zone shrinking and forcing players around. You have the classroom size multi yeah, and then there's the looting aspect, because they're in some sort of abandoned city, and they can scavenge and find tools and stuff like that. So that was the actual origins of the whole concept. But interestingly enough, that's actually not exactly how the games were developed. Like you mentioned earlier, it actually started way, way early on with a game called DayZ. Let's go to the next slide for a second here. So we have to kind of give credit to this genre. So what do you remember about DayZ?
So DayZ is a
DayZ.
post-zombie apocalypse game set in Russia, where you join a server that is populated with a bunch of people. There are respawns, but when you die, you take nothing with you. There is a lot of loot around the map, and all the towns have crazy names.
Yeah, exactly. So to expand on that a little bit, DayZ or DayZ was a mod for Arma. I think Arma 2 or 3,
Arma
I
2,
believe.
and you
Yeah,
require
Arma 2.
the Operation Arrowhead expansion.
Exactly. So it was already very difficult to play, but the fact that so many people went through the effort and the hoops to get this going and to play DayZ, it just kind of showed that there was like this massive interest in this kind of concept. And the concept in DayZ was actually very underdeveloped still, if you think about it. The main thing was that it was a persistent world on the server, right? So the idea that I think the main thing that DayZ brought to the Battle Royale concept was this idea of there's no rules for engagement that is set by the game besides a win condition, or kind of in DayZ's DayZ's case, it's essentially to survive, right? With PvP in there. So it allowed the players to move around in an environment, but it didn't have like a round system, didn't have a spawn point system. It didn't have any rules in terms of how you can approach someone. Whether you actually need to actually fight someone in general is another concept too. I think that was the thing that was so fresh in DayZ, as well as the whole concept of zombies. But then that just brought in the idea of when you see someone, you don't know what kind of engagement you're going to have. You don't know if they're going to run up at you right away. You don't know if they're running away, because in most other games and most other FPSs that we played in traditionally, the goal has always been just to kill the other player, right? Like before DayZ, almost every game that you thought of, TF2, Counter-Strike back in the day, it's just to kill the other team. But this concept of being able to make your own decisions, and then that coupled in with the looting aspect where you had this inventory and this thing that you've been building up, and the fact that you can lose such a high value aspect of your own like inventory just from getting into a fight made all the fights so much more intense, because it really was like a one-shot thing. Even if you just spawned, you're like, I just found some weapons, and you always have to deal with zombies, so there's always like supplies you need to heal yourself. So the idea when you killed someone, it actually meant something significant, as well as when you killed it, right?
And also to the other players too. I remember watching just some clips on DayZ, right? Because I just wanted to see what it was about, and I was never gonna play this game. It's not my kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there was two players just scoping out on a hill, scoping out a town because they wanted to get some resources, and see like, oh no, there's two players down there. It's like, are they coming towards us, or are they going away? It's like It looks like they're undecided right now. They're coming towards us. Like, I guess we gotta take them out. They spot us. We don't know if they're gonna act. Like, yeah, it's a shame. Looks like they have a lot of stuff. Like, we gotta do it, man.
It really makes you feel like you're in Walking Dead. You're like you're in an episode of The Walking Dead. You're like, well, we gotta take them out. They got supplies,
It's like they didn't even want to kill them. They just were afraid of getting killed. So they killed them. It's like, yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, it could be a whole episode.
We didn't know. we didn't know what they were gonna be up to, and like we had to kill them. And it's like, and then because they killed them, zombies were alerted to the sound. Like, guess we're moving on to the next town. They only killed them because they were afraid that they were gonna get killed in return. They moved on to another town. It's emergent storytelling in that sort of way, which made it very interesting. But the punishing factor of it made it feel it was a game that I don't put it in this way. I don't know anyone who played DayZ who did not also stream DayZ.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It is a performative game in that sort of way.
It's you can really role play in that game. I remember watching someone take someone hostage, and they are able to actually tie the ropes behind their back as a part of an in-game mechanic, and then they stripped them down, stole all their stuff, and they were just marching around. I'm like, oh wow, that's first like you'd have to have the game to allow this kind of random RP kind of style. And then also you have to have the players be willing to just buy into this whole storyline that they're making for themselves.
I mean, there's no stakes in the game, right? There is. You aren't trying to do anything.
Yeah.
Your only goal is to have fun and tell interesting stories afterwards. And in that way, why wouldn't you go along with anything?
I remember there was whole guilds built around helping survivors. It was there was a thing in the game that you could build a helicopter. It took a long time and it took a lot of
right.
exploration to go to the very hot, like dangerous hot zones filled with like zombies and possible other players to get the parts. And then so I remember this one guild had access to a helicopter. And so in the game, if you saved into a particular city, someone else could join into the server with their gear and then go around to. And so they would like helicopter people out of hot zones that were like when they were stuck in a place that they just couldn't get out and they know where they're gonna die. So it was just hilarious to see like the kind of community that built around it. But I think ultimately the problem with DayZ was that it was such a technical difficulty to play. And also, they had very little things that would help you play with other people. When you spawn. First thing was that you spawned and you didn't have a map, so you didn't know where you were, or a compass. So you couldn't spawn with your friends. And so if you wanted to play with a friend, you would have to find someone who either already knew what they were doing, or you would have to find your way to the same town before you would even ever see each other.
My experience playing DayZ, I spawned on a map, I walked around, did not know what to do, got eaten by a zombie, never saw a single player, said
Yeah. It's kind of like the experience some Minecraft players, like when they first and when they don't know anything about the game and they don't know the idea of building and they just like, I just knock trees down, blah blah blah, that's really it, and then they just quit before they learn any of that. I think that's what happened to you, because it's like if you just go into a town, you start looting, and then you can find all these supplies, and the whole game was essentially you're playing a Walking Dead like sim, where you're looking for gear. And then you might encounter a player in which you get super scared as soon as you encounter a player, and then you're just hiding from them, and then you have to make that decision, like you're saying, "Oh, do I have to kill them or something?"
Yeah. To be clear, I really like DayZ in theory and concept. I don't want to belittle it. I'm super into this style of game.
Yeah.
But only to watch, not to. Yeah,
play. But I totally agree. It was very difficult to play, to the point where I ended up not playing it, like in general. But then, so what's interesting is that. What I want to highlight is that the development cycle of it wasn't made by like a studio, and the Battle Royale genre wasn't made by a studio that said, hey, we want to, that movie Battle Royale, that was awesome. Like, we need to like make a game out of it. They practically couldn't, because by the way, that movie was banned in so many countries for the longest time. Yeah. Like it wasn't even released by Toei. I think it was Toei Studios, who does Toei Animations. It wasn't released internationally because they were afraid they would get lawsuits because it was so violent. It was a very violent movie, and also it was like a very Quentin Tarantino type movie, but like done by a Japanese director.
It's very grindhouse.
Very very grindhouse. Very funny in terms of it's so weird. Like in the very end, I'll just give you an example of some of the weirdness of this. It's a serious movie the entire time, right? Like for the most part, and they have like these stories about these kids who have to like make decisions between their friends, and what if one of them betrays them, wants to kill them, blah, blah, blah. And in the end, there's a shot where the coach, who's like the high school coach who drugs them all and brings them to this island, is like the mastermind for this particular Battle Royale. He gets shot like 7 times. He dies, and then the camera pans away, and then he just gets up. And he just gets up, kind of like shrugs off, and the camera's on him for like no reason. He starts eating like a sandwich. And we're like, the entire time, like, we have no idea as an audience member, like, why are you showing us this bit? Is this like he's like he was tricking them, or is he like a demon or something like that? So the movie's kind of wild overall.
Okay.
Sorry, I got so sidetracked here. But anyways, I'll just say the studio didn't design the Battle Royale concept. So after DayZ, H1Z1 was a bit of a controversy, because it was, on one hand, the first time a fully fledged game was made for an audience that wanted to play DayZ. It was to hit you, essentially. They wanted people like you who wanted to play DayZ but didn't want to get through like the technical hurdles, as well as the, it's just so many challenges to start having a good experience in DayZ, right? So they wanted to make it more streamlined. And
it was fully backed by Sony, I believe. At some point, right?
Exactly. They had funding. Unfortunately, I believe the problem was essentially it was too much of a rushed game, and it also had its massive amount of bugs, right? And so that's what the genre felt like early on. It felt like we were just slogging through these games that just they were just great concepts, but were done by let's say non-AAA developers, right?
Mhm.
And then PUBG comes along, and it's very much the same story, but they incrementally make the next step for battle royales. And PUBG has to you kind of need to recognize PUBG for what it accomplished, because it really laid the groundwork for what we consider the standard battle royale right now. It has everything that we're thinking. It has the looting, it has the last man standing out of a large group of players, and it has the shrinking battle zones, right? And so that's I wanted to point that out as the first landmark of what a battle royale game is, because the games that all came subsequently after it, you can see its inception in PUBG.
Yeah.
Now,
you would say this is the Dota mod for Warcraft 3 of the Battle Royale genre.
yes. If DayZ and H1Z1, they were essentially maps, and then this is like the first Dota mod, right?
Yeah.
And then so it has everything that you kind of want it to have, but there's a lot of improvements that could possibly happen. And if you go to the next slide, we can talk about the games that came after it. So PUBG was I would kind of categorize it as, especially now that we have so many other battle royales to kind of compare it to, it has the realistic gunfight sim quality to it, right? So it has bullet drop off, and it has very realistic gun markers, so you probably need to know how to sight your weapons in terms of like figuring out how the fall off is. The movement is very human realistic, kind of like a combat sim type of movement. And so I think there's a big market for that, but the problem at that time was that everyone who wanted just the battle royale experience in general had to go through that other lens of it too. They also had to play a combat sim, which is not the most exciting for everyone, especially for like a game that's so punishing. A combat sim can be very harsh for someone just jumping in. So games like the next generation, so like we have on the screen here, Fortnite, I would say Apex Legends. We have another game. Do you remember a game called Realm Royale?
Realm Royale was from the people that made Paladins.
You might be right on that. I don't quite remember exactly. But yeah, it's a battle royale that was it's still around, but it doesn't have the popularity as some of these other ones. And then Call of Duty Black Ops came out with a battle royale mode. So what I wanted to point out, as I kind of consider these the second generation of battle royales that came out. First, you had obviously. So the first one we have to point out is Fortnite. Fortnite is probably the most prolific, even still nowadays. It has a huge kind of following.
I thought we were talking about video games, though, not social experiences.
It's definitely a social experience now, too, if you want to play in that game. It's got a very specific culture. But that's just to say, so what was interesting is that I would categorize it as the type of battle royales that took another game and then augmented the base battle royale concept onto it. This was so obvious because there's Fortnite, what's it called? Something Save the World, the original concept of it.
Fortnite Save the World used to be called Fortnite. Fortnite Battle Royale used to be called Fortnite Battle Royale.
Yes.
Fortnite Battle Royale became Fortnite. Fortnite Save the World. Fortnite originally became Fortnite Save the World. They completely flipped on that.
Yeah. So, well, also just to say that it was the other concept of the game, which had the kind of base shooting mechanics, third-person shooter, and then obviously the most important part about Fortnite is the building mechanics that they took from that other game.
Almost the emphasis on Fortnite originally was the building more than the shooting, because the shooting mechanics in Fortnite were not good when they changed it into a Battle Royale game. It was not a PvP game at all.
Yeah.
And even to this day, playing that game, of all the Battle Royale games, you feel the shooting is noticeably weaker.
It's definitely the most simple. I would say that, yeah, I in terms of the skill set required, the ceiling for that shooting in that game is much lower. And then it's augmented by the fact that the building ceiling is so much higher than kind of any other technique that you need in the game.
Funniest phrase I ever heard someone
building
say
ceiling.
That too. But funniest phrase I've heard someone say about Fortnite was when, I don't remember where I heard this, but someone asked someone, is Fortnite the game where you shoot someone and they turn into a house?
Pretty much.
Which is that game.
It's very funny that but okay, so I wanted to point out another thing that Fortnite did that kind of people didn't really talk about it as much, is that it revolutionized Battle Royale's accessibility on the UI front, in the user interaction with the game and game experience front. So the one thing that it standardized across the entire industry was the main game layout. So you see the 3 players, like if you go into your home screen at Fortnite, you see the 4 characters all lined up in the main screen, right? That kind of UI system, as well as the store, as much as we as players talk about what the gameplay about Fortnite was that made it unique and successful, I bet you so many developers, and especially people who are kind of running marketing and the business side of it, are looking at what the store did and how they were able to monetize on this massive like game. Because Fortnite, like we were talking about, DayZ, H1Z1, and especially and PlayerUnknown's Battleground, they had notoriously poor UI to handle any of their in-game actions. It was so sluggish. You would go up to a body, you'd have to go to a full stop. This menu would come up that looks like you're in a Windows DOS menu with drop downs and stuff. It's so
hell
difficult.
yeah.
Where
hell
Fortnite,
yeah.
hell yeah. Well, Fortnite took pretty much the mobile gaming philosophy of making UI interactions, one, pleasurable, and 2, simple and understanding in terms of like they don't need to have multiple different types of interactions. Everything is look at something and press a button, you pick it up, or you swap something, right?
Also free.
Also free. Yeah, that the game model itself, that also kind of changed everything too, right? Because I believe at the time wasn't player like PUBG, that was paid, right? That wasn't a free game.
It was paid.
Right?
Is it not paid still?
I'm not sure. I knew a part of when Fortnite came out, and this will be a recurring theme in like all Battle Royale games, is that when the next Battle Royale game comes out, you see every studio jump to start making updates that they promised the community they would make a while ago.
Yeah.
So
PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is still a paid game.
Yeah, so exactly. They didn't even make that. They haven't made that kind of jump yet either. But Fortnite kind of revolutionized that sense. And then another thing that Fortnite did was it was the first cash cow that really made everyone look at the game in terms of not just the game developers making the money, but you have to think like how many Twitch careers and streamers have made some sort of following based off of their Fortnite like streams or gaming sessions, right?
They just made a reality TV show about multiple Fortnite streamers buying a multi-million-dollar mansion and living in separate rooms.
Oh my god. They did the same thing with StarCraft in Korea. It was a very, very popular pre-StarCraft tournament show, because you know StarCraft is so popular in Korea that like they have channels on TV dedicated to StarCraft. Yeah, and there would be shows like that where it's like StarCraft House or whatever it is. Yeah. Anyways, it spawned a lot of careers for streamers too. So it's so significant in that end. But I think what happened was everyone saw the success of Fortnite, and all the studios ran to do the same thing. And this is where you saw the rest of them come out, because essentially Black Ops was the same thing. They took their gameplay and then they made a game mode of it, and they augmented the Battle Royale concept. And Apex was the same thing with Titanfall, right? And
I believe Apex was more from the ground up.
Really? I thought, because they have the same guns as from Titanfall, but they handle differently.
They do. But it's more of like a Warzone situation where that's a separate executable from like anything, even Titanfall related. They dedicated that game from the ground up to be a Battle Royale game, where I feel with Fortnite, it was definitely more of a quick pivot from an existing system, rather than saying we're going to make the next iteration of a Battle Royale experience.
Yeah. Well, even if they made like a separate project with new stuff, the fact that they're reusing models and guns, it's obviously they took their skill set from, and you can see in the gameplay too with the movement styles that they have. Even though they don't have the full set of movement, they have the sliding mechanics.
Yeah.
So Apex brought that, and also like we always forget, but Apex revolutionized pinging systems in games. It was the first game that had the super solid pinging system that's in every single game now. It's even like in games like Valorant that was, you never would have expected because it was like a Counter-Strike type game. So like Apex kind of brought a lot to that, and then you saw all these kind of battle royales trying to see what was the right combination, and some things were good and some things weren't. And Realm Royale, for whatever reason, I can go into a bit of what I think the reasons are, but Realm Royale didn't succeed as well. It had a bit of a decent opening, but ultimately it didn't, in my opinion, innovate on enough mechanics. Because what I see with battle royales is that it's a new game mode that it's like you as a game designer getting to play with a brand new like frame for a car, and you're like, what can I put on top of this frame, and what kind of different vehicles can I make with this base like type of mode, right? And you see it in the next generation of games. If you go on to the next slide real quick, because after Black Ops, Call of Duty made Warzone, and Warzone, in all regards, is a better battle royale. I think almost every regard, it's a better battle royale.
Yeah.
They took their base concepts and like improved it. Go ahead.
They took the idea I always said that they should do for Battle Royale, which is if you get out, you should just go play deathmatch and try to win yourself back in. And they made something better than that napkin idea that I that I had for sure.
But I like
the Gulag is an interesting concept.
I like the Gulag that you mentioned, the Gulag, because it's essentially the industry's attempts to patch the problems that they saw in the previous battle royales. So we saw with Fortnite, they patched the UI and accessibility kind of problems. And then going forward, every other game that came out with battle royales kind of followed the same philosophies. And then in this generation, especially as well as Hyperscape, which is a new game, I'll talk a bit more about Hyperscape in a second, but in this genre, they're trying to patch out the slowness of battle royales, both in Fortnite, Apex, Call of Duty as well. If you consider your play session and you consider the action level compared to like a game of like Counter-Strike or something like that, where you get fighting every single round, right? Every like minute or 2 minutes or something like that. Battle royales are much, much slower paced, and then they have huge spikes in action in terms of the intensity, and then it's all or nothing during those kind of moments. I think these games, with the ability to bring people back, and then also in Hyperscape, they add a lot of, not only do they make it easy to bring someone back, but they bring in a lot of movement options. Hyperscape is essentially, in terms of, if you imagine what Call of Duty brought and augmented the Battle Royale concept, it's like taking a Quake or Unreal type game and augmenting the Battle Royale concept with that. They have, jump pads everywhere. The jump height is building size. You're kind of Superman bounding around the world. The guns are very similar to Quake in that there's like chain guns.
Do you reload?
Grenade launchers. You do reload, so
Okay.
it's like you do have reloads, but there's like rail guns, and then there's hit scan. The weapons feel very similar, and the movement feels very death or arena deathmatch type style, right?
Okay, you said they're hit scan?
They have some hit scan weapons, like the chain gun is a hit scan weapon, but they also have grenade launchers and like particle weapons.
Okay.
And then they do have an interesting concept that they added, which I also believe is to try to deal with the slowness of other battle royales, which is they have this concept at the end of the game where there's like a crown that spawns, and whoever gets the crown, and if you hold it for a certain amount of time, you'll win the game, rather than
Nice.
waiting for everyone to camp everything out, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's an interesting concept. I don't know how well it's worked, because the few times that I've seen it, because of the game's movement option, it makes running away just super powerful, because you can just hide behind tons of corners and just like protect yourself the entire time. So it's interesting, but it's essentially like the industry's attempt to kind of patch these things, because I think it's also just to recognize the fact that battle royales inherently have so many issues in terms of a game. It's like they stumbled onto gold, but they've got so much crap attached to it, and they're trying to like find a way to harness the gold part. Like how do you?
But
feel
the problem
about battle royales?
is everyone that's digging for this gold is already tired.
Well, what do you mean by that? How do you feel about the genre? Do you think it's kind of, like we talked about this? But
Do we want to get into this now?
Well, I
right.
think it's a very interesting genre. I do think it's getting a bit stale. But what do you think?
So, this is my relationship with battle royales. Is I started with PUBG, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one I first. And it took me a while to get into PUBG. It was blowing up at the indie studio that I was working at, right? Everyone was playing during lunch hours, and that's where the peer pressure comes in. Like, I don't want to spend 30 minutes in a match where I'm mostly sitting in a bathroom, and I finally I ponied up the money, I got in. I played it, and then immediately I got it, you know?
Yeah.
Because that game gives you a certain tension that I have not felt in a multiplayer game before. Shots ringing out like near you while you're in that bathtub hiding is so exciting. Someone storms into your house and you take out 2 of them with a shotgun and you go back to hiding into your bathroom again. That is a thrilling 2 seconds that is unparalleled in most other multiplayer games that I've played, or was unparalleled at that time.
Yeah.
But it's you're chasing a dragon at a certain point, right? And then I eventually realized this is the same thrill over and over. It is still a 30-minute investment of time. This is not the gaming that I'm going to be engaged with a long time. I am so glad that I had that experience with the game. I really enjoyed it. I petered off pretty hard after the first month.
It kind of sounds like what my experience with like World of Warcraft was. Like I played the first expansion and I loved it, but I realized that the time investment in terms of efficiency of fun that you're getting is kind of low, right?
And I felt I got the enjoyment that I needed out of it, right?
Yeah.
And then I shelved it.
Right.
And then it comes around Fortnite, right? And Fortnite is bright, it's colorful, it's the cool kid that everyone wants to play with, and it's free. So I played that, I got into it, I played a few rounds, I got a victory royale in a random group of people.
Yeah.
And I bought a battle pass, you know, that was when battle passes were hot, so I'm like, I should probably understand how this is. And I kept playing it, but I never once enjoyed it like I enjoyed PUBG, right? The shooting didn't feel as good. It wasn't as good. It was flashier. It was more colorful. It was more... I felt more compelled to play it than PUBG. It's interesting. I felt like I wanted to play Fortnite more.
It's the UI
because
and the
of
UX.
the cosmetics, because of the UI, because of the ease of play. But I enjoyed it significantly less.
It was
and yet I spent more time playing it than PUBG, a game that I vastly prefer.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like it was like lubricated for you to like easily pass through. Like it was easy to digest, right?
Yeah. And then
I totally understand that.
And then, but then, like, the building stuff never clicked for me. So then, eventually, I convinced myself to move away. And then a season pass would drop, and then be like, "Oh, you look at this guy; he's a werewolf." I'm like, "Kind of want the werewolf." So I play a little bit longer, and then I say, like, "No, this is stupid. This is marketing. This is. I am merely playing this because I like the way it looks, not because of anything else. This is a waste of time." So I dropped it. Apex comes out. And it's everything I thought I would have wanted in a game like this. It plays extremely well. The characters are awesome. It adds abilities which are very cool. I'm numbering things out here, but no one can see that. I played three matches of it, and I'm like, I don't think fundamentally I like Battle Royale. There are too many things wrong with it. There's the time commitment. There is the fact that once you lose and your friends keep going, you're just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for a revive. It is a lot of downtime. It is not. It's not Destiny 2, right? Which I was heavily into at that time. I played 3 matches of Apex Legends, and that's it. That's all I invested into that game. I got heavily into Call of Duty. I love that multiplayer. I played so much of Modern Warfare, Black Ops 4, Infinite Warfare, all that. I played off. Yeah. I have not touched Warzone.
Interesting.
Even though it added the feature that I thought would make Battle Royales better, like adding the deathmatch stuff, adding the more respawns, giving a loadout, all these cool things. And I'm like, yes, this is a... Fundamentally, as a designer, I'm really interested in these decisions you have made. I have not launched that game because I cannot bring myself to play another Battle Royale that lasts me 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's hard for me to disagree with you because I'm on a slightly different spectrum. Like, I played those games, all the games that you mentioned, a bit more than you did.
Yeah.
I got into Fortnite a little bit. I personally, I think there's a version of Fortnite that I really enjoy that they've already moved away from. And the building is a very interesting concept as a game mechanic. However, the same things happened to me with like all the other battle royales. Like I got really into Apex Legends as well. And I personally am still into those games, but the thing that you mentioned is holds true. Like after a while, you realize unless even if you're a super pro player, like you see this in all levels in terms of gameplay, playing a lot of battle royales gets you pissed off because you start feeling the unfairness of the whole genre. And this is one of the kind of things I wanted to bring up in terms of its current limitations in battle royales, is that they're inherently uncompetitive. Like if you have, imagine the systems that you have in battle royales in any sport like possible. Like if you have hockey where people just get random sticks, right? And some people's at the beginning of the game, you just get random sticks, and whoever gets the stick first, and some people have this short ass stick. Some people have like a stick that doesn't have like a curve at the end or something like that. Like, and then you're just like, okay, I wonder. It's not a fair game, and no one wants to compete on that level, right?
And the audience is throwing more sticks in.
Yeah, and there's just random stuff and then they keep changing the rules all the time. Yeah, so it's weird that battle royales have made that so acceptable. One thing that I've noticed that like they still haven't patched in any of the battle royales, although it's less obvious in Hyperscape because it's movement's easier, is that most battle royales have this extremely high RNG dependence for one, and then at the beginning of the round they have an extremely high punishing gameplay system. Dependent on whoever gets the first gun or loot system or loot that drops, right? So almost all of them give you no weapons to start off. So immediately, if someone gets any weapon, they are essentially 1 versus 0 against you, right? Like you have no chance because you have no weapon and no way to actually fight back. I find that so strange in any game because all of these games, every single one you mentioned, Call of Duty, Apex, Fortnite, they have tried to get their competitive scene going. Can you go to the next slide for a second real quick?
Yep.
Because that's the next thing I want to talk about. So they all have tried to get, and Fortnite especially had and probably still does have so much money invested into their esports scene, which if we're going to be honest, like even though Fortnite is still a functional business for so many people and so many streamers and this tournament's running, I think it's very clear that none of the competitive side is taking off, and the esports community is nowhere near the level that you would expect for a game that has that much money involved.
I thought, doesn't it have like a huge prize purse? I had assumed it was pretty big.
The initial tournaments had huge prize purses, like $1 million prize purses, but there's a lot of players who actually haven't been paid by Epic still, and there's a lot of outstanding kind of claims against them. And then as well, this is a huge problem that I see in all esports scene, which I really hope they fix, but I don't know if they will, is the idea that you can just pour money onto the scene and then it will grow. Because if you look at because they're trying to emulate other scenes that are super lucrative, like let's say Counter-Strike, right? Dota, or League of Legends. All these games have massive amounts of like economic value coming into from the tournaments, the players, the streamers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But those are all built off of more grassroots efforts and levels in the community. The tournaments are run not just exclusively by the game owners, although Riot, has its control over it. They still allow tournaments from other places. But like the Counter-Strike, for example, there are so many more local tournaments and people, and a way for the people to grow the game in terms of and play it how they want to play it. Whereas what you saw in Fortnite was that there's this massive prize pool, but there you could go through and whether or not you agree with some of the balancing changes or not, there's a lot of players that have turned away from Fortnite because of the way the game has been balanced. I would say
sorry.
No, and I would just say that the general feeling on their sense is that it's been balanced to take away competitiveness.
I feel that's intentional on the part of developers as well, because you look at what they focus on with their social events, like the Ty Dolla $ign concert.
Or the Marshmallow. That's his name.
So what is it?
His name is Marshmallow. That's the character up on the screen.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And like doing business deals to get Captain America into the game, to get Thanos into the game, to get the premiere of the Tenet, the new Christopher Nolan movie, into the game.
Deadpool.
It's becoming a social hub, right?
Yeah.
It becomes a thing you go to hang out with your kids, with your kids. It becomes a game you hang out with your classmates during recess.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, and I think that's probably the answer that's kind of the unsaid answer. I don't think that they could ever go out and say, hey, we don't really want to like focus as much on our esports, which is a bit of a shame to me, because like it's undeniable that the Fortnite's growth has kind of petered off. I think it's seen a bit of the same thing that WoW saw. I'm not sure WoW's numbers are now because of WoW Classic, but WoW had this huge like golden age period and then it started to drop off as players kind of either grew tired of the current content or stuff just wasn't changed, or people just stopped playing because things weren't kind of new. I think that's where Fortnite kind of is right now. It's still, I'm not going to say it's a dead game because it's obviously being played quite heavily by a lot of players still.
Yeah.
But I do see a bit of a staleness in their scene and the competitive side. Like, I haven't seen any solutions to some of these other issues that if you wanted to have a good competitive scene, like for example, the first tournament they did and subsequent tournaments, it's extremely hard to follow anyone when there's 100 players in the game and they're all at varying points of action. So let's say in the course of a Fortnite game, you have 10% of it is action and 90% of it is going to be looting or positioning yourself, right? So how do you capture when that 10% happens? What happens is most of the time you're watching someone break down a tree or pick up like a chest or run through the forest or something like that. And then they're trying to catch the action, but then they're clipping through and it's just chaos. And then what's exacerbated is that the gameplay side of it, and this is prevalent in other BRs too, is that camping is way too powerful in almost every aspect of battle royales. There's no incentive to kill someone when your only goal is to be the last man standing. Like, why would you take that risk? Why would you put yourself in a situation where you might lose? And then there's almost usually no gains from initiating a fight.
That's also the problem I have playing that game as well.
So, and this is something that the community wanted. Like, so one of the patches, which is I find it so strange, is that Fortnite added in this ability to siphon kills. So, like, if you kill someone, you get a small portion of health back.
Interesting.
And this really helps eliminate some of the biggest problems in battle royales, which is another thing is the third personing. It's the idea that it's better to jump onto a fight after someone else has fought.
Yeah.
Right? So they put this in and then people loved it and then they took it out. And people wanted it back to this day. And this is the problem with New Fortnite, because there's patches where they have these great mechanics that come out of nowhere. Like, for example, there used to be a weapon swap called the double pump meta where you could double pump someone. It allows you to really quickly kill someone.
Ken, this is a family show.
Yeah. Anyways, it was in terms of watching streamers, it was very entertaining because it took a bit of skill. I didn't think it was quite unfair, but it was also allowed you to dominate certain players that, it was very showcasey. But they took that out, and they have all these other things where they tried, but then they decide to keep those things out, but put in things that are kind of RNG that help level the playing field so that a newer player can beat a seasoned vet. Right, or had a less of a skill disparity. So all those actions kind of pushed it away from being like anything that you would want to be competitive. Like, can you imagine if you were a professional player in a sport and you're trying to make your career off of being good, but the game is inherently designed so that it's constantly trying to put you in a situation where it doesn't matter whether you're good or not. It's whether you got the right roll of the dice or got the weapon first. So I think that as a whole is really holding back battle royales. If you go to the next slide, this is another problem with particularly Fortnite, is that it's
what am I looking at here? It's
incredibly hard to watch. Like, what you're looking at is the end game of a tournament or a competitive game, in that everyone.
It's just a lot of stairs and towers all stacked up on each other.
Yeah. So Fortnite, the circle, the quote unquote circle is a circle. So then it shrinks and you can build up, and then no one wants to essentially fight. So they all stay in their own little holes until the circle moves, in which case they all have to jump out of their holes and build. But you're getting this giant like column in the air of people building, and that's when all the action takes place, which is not necessarily unfun, but it's horrible to watch. You have no idea what's going on because everyone's in a mad scramble and everyone's inside their own like little cube, and they open the cube and make another cube and they run out to the next cube and they close the cube, and that's the entire gameplay. It's not very fun to watch, right? It's not like you're watching one person fight another person and you see how well they're skilled and you see what they do to outbuild them, and then get the kill. Like, it's too chaotic. So essentially, it has no audience value. So that's a key point to esports, is the audience value. And you see that in games right now. Like, Valorant is not struggling, but they're quickly needing to adapt their observer camera so that, like, you can have a camera in a tournament, right? Like if you're hosting an international tournament like Counter-Strike does, they have all these UI elements that are built into the game to help make it easier for players to watch. Like they have everyone's gun loadout on the side, stuff like that. So they haven't made that. It's hard to think of an advancement in technology that would help solve this particular issue in battle royales, right? The camping issue and the chaotic ending. And the next screen is the example of the same problem, but in Apex. Apex still has the camping problem. There are characters that you can essentially build wires and trap zones inside buildings, and the building becomes camping hubs. And so the game is essentially a bunch. And what's ironic is that another thing that's really hard is that for large games like 100-player games, 60-player games like Apex, it's hard to find scrims as you're a pro player to develop the competitive side. You can't play with pubs because if you're deciding to go into a tournament, then if everyone is as good as you in terms of skill set, the games play completely different than if you're playing with public players, right? To the point where I've seen in every Battle Royale game, pros complain nonstop about when they play in pubs, like, wow, these people just push me, and it's so stupid because you never push someone in pro, and how can we get scrims like this when it's not good practice because they're not playing like pros. And it's essentially like a sign of how the meta of the game is so different than the average player's perspective. In terms of the average player's play, they'll have a fun experience, but at the highest level, the meta, the best option, I don't know if this is the actual term, but the meta stands for most efficient tactics or taking action, right? So the best play for everyone to make is to camp because why take that risk, right? So I think that's the problem with Battle Royales now, and you see games like Hyperscape try to figure that out with the crown system so they can get away from the idea that, last man standing, but how do you make it so that everyone still wants to kill each other and stuff and has a good time and has good plays? I don't particularly know.
I often wonder with the case of Battle Royale, because what I ultimately enjoyed about that game was not so much how it worked, the design of it. It was more the emotion I got from it, right?
Yeah.
That's the big contrast
right?
for me between PUBG and Fortnite. Is I played Fortnite out of like the aesthetic and the popularity and the marketing of it, and PUBG I enjoyed for that brief moment that I played it was because of the emotion that I got, that tension. It made me feel something that I wanted to feel more for a set amount of time before it wore out its own come. So I almost feel the popularity of a battle royale in the future might not even be beholden to a lot of the mechanics you associate with them right now. The looting, for example, the circle, the way it goes. There is some sort of other combination of mechanics that will generate that feeling of tension and rewarding success that you can fit into a 15-minute match, and it may not even resemble anything at all like a battle royale, but that ultimately to me is what I want to feel.
So I find it. So I think it's really interesting you said that, because it's a part of what I think the evolution of the genre needs. I think right now, it's getting a bit stale. If I look at the past iterations that in the third generation category that I just had with, Call of Duty, Warzone, and then Hyperscape, if you look at the quote unquote innovations they're adding, it's so incremental. It's such a small increment in terms of the next level compared when you look at the previous genre and the previous generations. It's made
also
bigger
additive,
jumps.
Right?
It's additive.
It's more stuff, but it's not changing the fundamental stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what the genre. I think that's where eventually the genre will go. Is that people will stop trying to make specifically a battle royale game, but take the idea of battle royale and see where it will function elsewhere to help. So it's almost like in painting, maybe you discover a new color. Let's say everyone discovered the color purple, which historically was actually a very difficult color to produce with oils because the pigment was very rare. You had to make it from crushed seashell animals and stuff like that, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was the only way that they could get in the past. So if you look at back in the day, blue or purple clothing was very rare because it was essentially no dye to make it. And same thing for paintings, they had less color available. But then eventually modern practices came and blue became available. So it's almost like a lot of artists got blue available. And so they would paint these paintings that are all blue dominant, right? But the thing about color is that sometimes having blue as a secondary unlocks so many other possibilities with your other colors. And I see the same thing with Battle Royales, is that the idea of Battle Royale can unlock so many more interesting modes in different genres. And I'll give you a couple examples, but one example that you're talking about, because what I see with what you were talking about and what you loved about PUBG and possibly DayZ was that it felt like a massively multiplayer online Last of Us game, right? It felt kind of like you were looting, you had this other objectives, but then there's this wild element that could come in at any time. But because it's a mainly lower, smaller paced game that eventually heightens up, you get that tension. You feel the tension because of how calm and more simple it was in the previous section, right?
Yeah. Honestly, the looting is so much less the part. I mean, looting feels like a necessity to have a passive thing that no one is threatening you in the time, but you are vulnerable doing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
That's the core. If we break it down into the emotions that I enjoyed, it's the vulnerability while doing something necessary, and the surprise of having something awful happen to you. And it's the interplay between those two that create that emotion of tension and excitement.
So, exactly. So, I bet you there's better ways for us to get that. Let me propose a hypothetical game for you. Let's take the Fallout universe, right? And let's take the DayZ concept and put those together. And we say we have a Fallout persistent server universe where you can loot around one of the maps, say the Washington map or something like that, right? But you can encounter players there at any time. And then you can even have your own campaigns like a MMO, but you're constantly looting through areas where someone might be able to kill you with a gun, or et cetera, et cetera. And
is this just Fallout 76?
Maybe that's what Fallout 76 tried to be, but Fallout 76 had its issues, and I'm not sure where it is right now. But possibly, right? It could be a game out there that's exactly like that. But that's the idea. Like, where you take this Battle Royale, parts of Battle Royale, and add it into a bigger concept. And if you go to my last slide, this is my ultimate dream. I want to put it out there to see if it's possible.
Drum roll.
So I'm super hyped about Squadrons.
Oh, of course you would do this.
And I think that the fucking fighter pilot genre is perfect for a Battle Royale type mode.
Yes.
Right? It's so perfect.
Yes.
It could work so well. Everything's they tried to do this with cars already. They did it. They have a car Battle Royale.
Auto Royale from H1Z1.
Yeah. Essentially, it's less fun because I don't know, the car genre is smaller, even though it's fun. It's smaller. But I think Squadrons is going to be something huge, or just fighter pilots in general. And you can imagine the power ups are already there, the mechanics are already there, but the main gameplay mode is so different than what most Battle Royales have, where it's like a gunship or a fighter pilot type of thing, where I would love to see something like that get sprinkled in there. And, it would be so much fun. I would definitely love to be the last pilot standing,
I got a pitch for you.
Yeah, what's that?
I got a pitch for you.
What?
All right. So you got a big space map, right?
Yeah.
And everyone is a mercenary. And there's this big war between these two empires. Everyone wants to make the most money, right? And their money is stored on their ships.
Right.
And they're going around doing contracts for these different sides. You got to escort these guys. Get them over the imperial border and smuggle them through. Or you got to deliver this bomb. And so you take this contract and you got all your ships and you're moving through space. And then suddenly two guys jump out and they got their ships and they have a contract on you because you are working for the opposite side.
Essentially, that's what I would love, because then, Battle Royales already have that. I think which game is it? But they added contracts into a Battle Royale where you can
really.
I think it's something you can it might be Warzone. I don't want to. I haven't gotten too much into Warzone, so I can't be sure. But I think it's something you can get a contract to try to kill someone that's specifically on the match that you're playing. Anyways, I would freaking love that. I would freaking love that to be able.
But that's not a Battle Royale game. That is a server based massive online game. With huge penalties. Look at how tasty this is. This goes back to what DayZ was.
Oh yeah, I know what you
Right?
mean. Like
That
to
is
have,
what that
like,
game was. It's a big map. While you don't have an objective, your objective is just to survive. But in our space battle multiplayer palooza, you want to get the most money so you can have the biggest ship.
that would be really
You know?
interesting too.
At a
Like,
certain point,
I would
this
love to
just
see that
becomes
mode as
EVE
well.
Online, though. So you got to be careful. You got to limit it somehow.
And you see some of that already happening in Eve, right? Eve Online has some of these crazy player-made type, like, galactic battles and stuff. But it's Eve also suffers from the same problem right now. Maybe it doesn't, but I think it has the same problem as DayZ, where it's like extremely hard to get into for a new player. As much as the community, I know the community has made a lot of efforts to make it easier, and that's very, like, it's very impressive by the community itself. But the game itself is very difficult to get into for a newbie.
I
Whereas
think you
would
have to constrain it down in a way like
Yeah.
this. Like it just make it server based. You have an account, sort of like Escape from Tarkov, which we haven't even talked about.
Yes, I should have mentioned that. That was another genre that was kind of fascinating because that does take more from H1Z1 and DayZ style, right?
But it's restricting it to sort of a single server based, and what you take with you is your character.
Yeah.
And you have that tension of at any time I can lose anything, and of course. The thing that I always want to do is like restrict limits on that. Sort of how Escape from Tarkov does. You lose what you take with you, right? If you die, but you can gain so much more. But you're not wiped clean, right?
Yeah,
and you have some
like
sort
a
of
base
progression,
or something, right? Yeah.
So in our space battle game, you join a server, and then it's populated with the contracts. You take the contracts, it helps along, or you hunt people, right? Like Sea of Thieves
like a
style,
PvP
right?
Mercenary. Yeah.
Like this is Sea
that
of
would
Thieves.
be really fun. And
This
then you
is
can
Sea
have,
of
like,
Thieves
wings
in space with more
I would
players.
love that.
See, this is all taking stuff that we have learned, and we're building this. And you have that tension, right? You have that tension that I enjoy, and you have systems that build upon that, and you get rid of all the stuff. There's no camping because your whole goal is to make more money. You want to get the better ships. You want to get better weapons. This is a fun game. Someone should make this.
I'm sold. I also like part of it is that I think that the flight I don't know what you call it, flight combat category is primed to blow up if there are some innovations in the gameplay. Like, do you like imagine what just look at what Mario Kart's done in its own iterations every game, right? Like the innovations that they've made with the drifting and the abilities and the items and stuff like that. Like, I think that that's what the genre needs. It's like a more innovation on the movement style for like ships and stuff. That's why I'm so excited for Squadrons, because it's gonna bring it back into the forefront, and it's gonna bring it back in a way that could be really, really exciting. I'm gonna play it in VR 100%.
Hell yeah,
100% in VR.
Hell yeah.
You have no idea how fun it is to like look in one direction while you're flying in another direction, be able to scan the sky like properly. It's great. That's pretty much it. All I had for battle royales. I think it's a very interesting genre. I'm kind of interested to see where it goes next. It does feel slightly stale in my opinion, but I think that there's obviously something there in terms of they've hit some sort of, what do you call it? Like a pleasure point in gamers that they haven't figured out exactly what it is and where it can be applied. But it's like when the turn-based RPG first came out, and everyone's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's a great idea. And then everyone starts to iterate on see what they can do with that particular style.
And then we get tired of turn-based RPGs and says like, well, what if you could move around the field and you just had to manage resources?
RTS?
No, I was thinking specifically like action RPGs.
Oh,
like,
like
Fable
ones,
or The Witcher or
Secret of Mana.
Yeah,
exactly. That was just a combination of two other genres. So I liked the Battle Royales is like a new element that we get to play with and combine in different ways.
Always to me, it's game mechanics always boil down to emotions in players, right? And I don't think the success of any one game is dependent on what mechanics they use, but it's more dependent on what emotion they generate in a player, right? A successful survival horror game makes a player feel stressed and anxious and successful when they get through by the skin of your teeth. That makes a successful survival horror game. It's not specifically the inventory management. It's not specifically the enemies you're fighting. It is all those combined that generate that emotion. You can get the same emotion from a battle royale in a different sort of game. And to me, at this point, They're just making a battle royale game for the sake of replicating those mechanics to hit on that same emotion.
Yeah.
But that's where the stale part comes from, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of these games are bad. Like let's say that off the bat. None of these games are bad because they're made with mechanics that work by teams that are extremely capable.
Yeah.
They're failing to hit their point because they're just repeating the same thing, right?
I see that. Don't you see that in so many games? And
yeah.
And you see it all over multiple industries, including the art industry. It's just, people they want recipes for success, but it takes a lot for someone to understand how to actually craft it. Like we were talking about, Spider-Verse last episode, and the beauty was that they were so familiar with their tools. They were real experts with their tools. And I feel like that's what's kind of missing in some of these newer games. Like I really feel it in some games. Like I felt it in Hyperscape, that like it felt like they were trying to hit those check marks, but they don't know the tools of the gameplay mechanics they're putting together well enough to put something together super sharp and unique. They're just trying to go through the motions, and maybe this will be the success. It's the same thing where how every MMO that came after WoW came out, and none of them were able to really dethrone it or even challenge it for a while. Right?
Rest in peace, WildStar.
Yeah, exactly.
Does anyone even remember WildStar, or did I just age myself?
I remember WildStar. I obviously didn't play it, but it was also because I didn't play any MMOs after World of Warcraft.
That's valid.
Yeah. So I think that's true. I think that it would be interesting to see someone with a better mastery of the techniques, because you're right. Like ultimately, it's the emotion that we want to get, but it is the specifics of how we get there are those gameplay mechanics and experiences.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Speaking of emotions, let me tell you about the emotions of having 200 cars race around a single track, and about the tension and excitement you get from that, because that is actually pretty similar, which is why I thought it was interesting we saddled Trackmania together with our Battle Royale experience.
Trackmania is very interesting as a game in its own.
Yeah.
It's a very different take on a genre that was kind of super stale. It almost feels like a super quiet indie game, even though it's got a huge following.
Well, it has, because it's been old. It's old. It's been around since 2003, and it hasn't fundamentally changed in many different ways. The core idea of Trackmania, for people that aren't familiar, it is sort of the Hot Wheels game that you always wanted. It is crazy tracks with extremely fast cars, and it's time trial focused. So you're racing in these tracks that have loop-de-loops, crazy jumps, very tight corners, that you are trying to nail to get the fastest time. And the preferred way for me to play this game is online, because similar to a Battle Royale game, it is many cars, depending on which server, even up to 200. I have footage on screen showing me playing in a 200-player server with at least 120 people.
Wow, getting a top score with 200 people must feel so good.
It must be, and I'll never do it, because you'll see the leaderboard at the end. The Germans and the French are amazing at this game.
That's so funny.
It is almost entirely dominant. It's like they're playing a different game. But the thing about Trackmania that is so emotionally resonant is that it does give me that tension, because you have these tracks that are between maybe as low as 15 seconds to as high as a minute and a half. And any wrong move that you make in this game can destroy your time and your hopes of succeeding. And the matches are about 5 to 8 minutes in length. So you have only this amount of time to make a good time on your leaderboard while you're watching all these other cars race around the track. It is one of the most thrilling and unique online racing experiences that I have had, and I love Trackmania to bits. I loved it ever since I played it online in high school on the IT lab computers.
Wow, 2003. I hadn't realized it was such.
It is a long time. It is a long. I was still in elementary school when they made the first version of this game. Later on, they made a version that was in the web, and that's the version that I started with. Is the version that was made available on the web, and you could just play it in your browser. Eventually, it would go on to spawn a bunch of other expansions and environments. They would make Trackmania 2 back at the start of the previous generation, do different environments for that. Start this Mania Planet system where they also made Shoot Mania and Quest Mania, which didn't take off at all. And
so,
then
I have a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Has the community tools always been available in this game to make your own
That has
maps and
always
stuff?
been a big driving factor, as far as I'm aware of. As far as I started playing Trackmania, which was Trackmania after the browser one is where I got serious, was Trackmania Nations, which had a free version that was allowed you to play, I think, 5 games on a server every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's how they limited it. Or you could pay a lump sum, I think, of $30, and that got you access to unlimited server play times and a bunch of offline tracks that you could play and compete on leaderboards that way.
I find that that's like a super key component that so many studios underutilize is the community map building possibilities.
That's actually the core of this talk that I wanted to have, is how integral user-generated content is to a game. Because this game, which is just called Trackmania, it's ostensibly a reboot of Trackmania Nations, which is the one that I was involved the most in. We're just going to call it Trackmania 2020 going forward, just for simplicity. Trackmania 2020 launched, I think, 2 weeks ago at this point, maybe less. It was on July the 1st.
Yeah.
And it has a few tiers of subscriptions. There's the free version, right, which you can only play on playlist servers, which cycle throughout the day, and you get limited access to the campaign and leaderboards, and you can't join clubs. $10 gets you into the more common tier, which lets you play on any server you want. You can search any club and join their servers. You can't join the clubs themselves, which are the social spheres of the game where you can compete with other players in that club, so you're not tracking your rank between all the German players who are insanely good.
So that's like being on like the official like ranking of the worlds, right?
Yeah. You're always on the official ranking. Any version you play will show you your ranking in your province or state,
right?
In your country, and in the world.
Okay.
So already, like, I was playing the game and I was like top in BC, and I was feeling pretty happy with myself and a lot of like the campaign stuff. And then I played online and it got destroyed by Germans, and I'm like, yeah, this is Trackmania. This is how it goes.
Sounds about right.
But that's where the $30 tier gets you into the clubs, and you can like compete with your friends in clubs and different servers and sort of build your communities. I'm part of one of these communities for which I'm not gonna name.
That you're a part of?
Because I don't want people to stomp me there. Just kidding. It's a Giant Bomb community. It's the one they've always had for Trackmania 2 and Trackmania Nations.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they've built up their own club for this, so you're competing against ranked people who you recognize names of. They're people you've played with before.
Oh, cool.
And that's all community based, right?
Yeah.
And this is the real Trackmania that I loved, right? It is a fun game, but where it gets real good, it's when you play these crazy custom tracks that people made.
Yeah.
And you're playing it on this customized server that they're running a dedicated server on, and it is playing the filthiest techno remixes of songs. You're listening to Cher and like My Heart Will Go On, and like crazy techno remix. You're hearing techno mashups with like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, and it is just the stupidest music. And I love it.
The internet.
And
like
I love it.
Earliest days of gaming. It's so funny where you could just have Blair anything you want over voice comms or something.
Yeah. But it sounds great because it's integrated into the server. There's like track voting. You can upload your tracks to the server creator, and they'll drop it in there. So if you make your own tracks, he'll like run it by, and people can vote on them, and then based on the vote, they can decide which tracks stay. So it's constantly changing. It feels like a living, breathing community that I'm just a small part of, right? Yeah. And that is Trackmania to me. But Trackmania is more than that to so many people. What I'm showing here in video footage right now for the past few minutes are only full speed tracks.
Right.
Full speed
There's so many
tracks.
other tracks.
Full speed tracks are tracks that you can ostensibly run without letting off the accelerator. Germans love these tracks. And if you've been watching like the leaderboards, all of them are filled with Germans and one Jamaican guy who looks kind of lost, and he's doing extremely well. But the rest of it is all German flags.
Yeah.
And they love that type. Later on in the video, you'll see I'll jump to technical tracks. Technical tracks are shorter, but have interesting little quirks and tricks, or more depend on you hitting apexes. Or you understanding that if you brake in the middle of the air, your car will stop rotating. And you can get better speed that way. It's finding these little tricks. They'll give you that little extra millisecond. They'll put it on top of leaderboards. Those are the types of tracks that I enjoy.
You know why I think the Germans are so good at that full speed one?
What is that?
They got the Autobahn.
That's interesting. Yeah,
full speed track.
The traditional real life full speed track.
They're just like, oh yeah, I'm used to this. No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you need a brake if it's just a straightaway?
So true. So true.
It's great. And so there's different types of Trackmania that people enjoy playing. It is so diverse, and it's so based on those different communities. To me, Trackmania is those crazy custom tracks with the crazy loops and the crazy songs playing in the background. And I have fun playing those and ranking with the people that I've done this done this with before and enjoyed it in the past.
You know what I love about Trackmania is that it almost encapsulates the perfect like alpha gray block game, but just keeps getting iterated, but gets super super polished and super fun. They just have the basics there. Yeah, I love it.
It definitely has that feeling, and that feeling of fresh con. People finding out different things to do with custom tracks, using them in different ways, bending them to their whims. But you can also straight up upload meshes to the track editor.
Oh,
right.
Nice.
In previous iterations, you could do that. You can build custom car models. So there's people that are running around as like the DeLorean. Trackmania is the game that you wanted when you watched Ready Player One.
Ready Player One.
Because there's people running out as a DeLorean. There's people running around as Sonic the Hedgehog, and he's being chased by another guy who's playing as Dr. Robotnik in his like Eggmobile.
That's hilarious.
It is pure joy encapsulated in a multiplayer environment, and everyone that I've played Trackmania with has just been the nicest people. They're just there to have fun, having fun rivalries where you're like, Clappy, you got first by me by just 10 milliseconds. I'm gonna get you on the next track. And it's so fast, right? Because it's just 5 minutes. You're back into it. There's no hard feelings. There's just that constant goal. You're swapping strategies like, if you hit this apex on this track in this way, or if you let off the gas here, then that's going to give you a faster time.
Yeah.
It's built up such a pure and fun community while still preserving that fun tension that I mentioned before that you have in Battle Royales. Of at that moment, things can go wrong and you lose everything. At any point where you're making those tracks, especially on the full speed ones, if you make any mistake, your 1 minute that you were trying to get just a few milliseconds under is gone, and you're back to the start. You can lose so much in a heartbeat. But the punishment isn't so severe because you just start off. And if you're having a really bad track, just hold on for another 4 minutes. You're back to a brand new one. Probably something you've never seen before.
Yeah, it's super quick. There's no downtime like in Battle Royales that we're talking about. Yeah,
it is such a special game for me that it hits all those crucial notes.
You know what I think it is? From what I see, like I played Trackmania with some friends, but I obviously didn't get into the community as much as you're talking about. But what I love about this community and some other communities I've seen is that like it just highlights how well the community is at finding the fun in a game. And that like if you just allow your community the tools and ability to do it, they will find it. And I think if you look at almost like name some of the most successful multiplayer games out there right now, just name some of them. Like what would you come off top of your head right now?
Top multiplayer games right now?
Just like one of the biggest, most successful like metrics of multiplayer games.
Minecraft, right Roblox.
Okay. Let's say Minecraft is a great example, right? Yeah. Like Minecraft.
I feel like those are quietly the most successful games still, right?
Yeah, quietly or not quietly, because we'll have different examples. But Minecraft's a great example because that also has a massive modding community to it. Communities that open graphics packs that make all these options for how you want to play. There's a Battle Royale Minecraft mod, right? And it's the idea that you can make this game and allow your players to change it to what they want, and then they now have a perfect game for them. Whereas I've seen so many issues. Like, I just want to use Blizzard as an example with StarCraft, because StarCraft, by any expectations, should have been one of the biggest esports scenes out there right now. StarCraft 2. Because it hit at a perfect time with a perfect cultural zeitgeist for StarCraft 1 coming out of it. But I think the problem with them is that there was a stranglehold on the creative side of the community. First off, their marketplace for maps was under full Blizzard control. And the second thing, well, it's one full Blizzard. You had to publish through their servers. Before, in Warcraft or StarCraft 1, you could share a physical file to someone to get them to try your map.
Nice.
Here, you cannot do that in StarCraft 2 unless you publish it on their online server stuff. And then from that point, there's no way to it's very, very difficult for someone to find your map. I went through that process. It's not the same, right? And then they had this paid element. But another thing was that if you look at Overwatch or other FPSs right now, most of them don't allow community-made maps anymore. And if you look at Counter-Strike, almost all of their best maps are community-made. Almost every single one that's in competitive mode.
Remember Level Lord and all those levels where they were very small in a very big environment, like in a kitchen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like there's DE Mouse or something like that, where you're the size of a mouse. There were so many fun games that I had, memories that I had playing those different modes, and it was unique fun that was only available to if they allowed us to mod. Whereas nowadays you would never get that ability with Overwatch, even though they have that modding capability that they added in there with the toolkit. It's not nearly as accessible enough like a game like Trackmania, where you could build your own levels. And Trackmania has such great stuff. They have the thing where it's not even a race, it's just you can see the level and then you just press forward and then it goes through some crazy acrobatics. You jump through these hairline curves and stuff. That stuff is stuff that's so unique that you won't be able to express in another game that shunts its community, right?
Yeah. So and it's definitely like I said, Trackmania is different things to so many different people, and it's because of the flexibility, because of their availability of putting out the source code for you to be able to run your own dedicated servers. For example, in these videos, you see all these tags and these leaderboards down at the bottom, all that stuff. None of that is in the game by default.
Right. This
So,
is an added part.
this big pane over here that shows the top people on the server, how people are doing today, how people have done, how many people have joined, how many people have played and finished the most tracks. All that is stuff that shockingly, considering the game has only been out for a week and a half, people have already built up and have been adding onto their own custom servers.
Wait. Trackmania's only been out for a week and a half?
Yeah.
So, this is a new one.
This is Trackmania 2020.
About the previous one.
No,
okay,
this is
wow,
Trackmania 2020.
Realize.
This is stuff that's happening right now.
I'm so behind on this in this field here. Wow. Okay, I got. Wow, that's crazy. That's great to hear though that they've already been. Weeks, yeah.
Literally the guy on the Giant Bomb servers, I've been hanging out there in the channel, and we've been playing on just the campaign tracks, for a while, for the first 4 days. And then I think only 4 days ago, the guy had a dedicated server up and it was playing the trashy music we love already.
I love dedicated servers. Do you? I feel like there. You can correct me if you feel differently, but I feel like there is almost sometimes a bit of a resentment that I feel in game design. Whoever is doing game design decisions at bigger studios, that they don't like that the community has found something that they didn't think of. I see that a lot. I don't know about if you look at Smash Brothers Melee, there were so many techniques that they specifically took out of the game in the next iteration that was accidental that they found in the first iteration that people love. Do you ever feel that?
Well,
do you feel there's a bit of resentment?
Those are fixing bugs, Ken.
Yeah, fixing.
You're not supposed to wave dash.
It's not the intention of the game. Fortnite too, where they took out patches that people loved for some reason, right? So I wonder.
Yeah, I can't really explain that. I don't understand too much about how Fortnite is made. It sounds there's a lot of desperate anxiety in how that game's developed because it patches so fast.
Yeah.
That it feels stuff comes off the cut. I don't know anybody that works on Fortnite. I have never worked on Fortnite. Well, I don't know how they do things.
I obviously can't speak for the people who work there and make the decisions because that's always kind of a curtain that you can't see through.
Yeah.
But just by you see some communities, like you see obviously Trackmania, when they made this next game, they had all the opportunity they wanted to try to like overly monetize it, perhaps.
Well,
you can't do. Am I wrong about that? Did they overly monetize it?
Here's the thing, right? And this is a big contentious topic with Trackmania because it did launch with a subscription service. This thing that I mentioned, those pricing tiers that I told you about, that's a yearly price.
That's very reasonable.
You pay that for exactly though, because here's how they monetized Trackmania before is every year or every few months or so they would release a new environment, and now it's like you paid $30 for that. Here, what you're paying for is a year. Right, you're paying for a year Trackmania, but they're supporting with a track per day that's coming from the community, with its own leaderboards and its own place on the on the home screen, which again leveraging their community. Official tracks that they're launching are tracks that are going to have their own track of the day campaign. So that's 365 tracks that are going to be officially supported by the game. For better or worse, I've played some of the track of the day tracks, and some of them are really, really bad. There's one that I'm not sure how it got through, but it's just a cock and balls, and it's the most boring track I ever played. Huh?
But you get 365 of them.
Yeah, 365 of those, and you get that with a $10 tier. The only thing you pay $30 for is if you want to be part of a club, and you want to specifically join their rankings. Even with the $10 tier, you can go to a club, not join them. But you can still play on their custom server.
Oh, I mean that's pretty good if you think about how much a WoW subscription is, right? Like, and that's per month. So
that's per month. Like, this is per
exactly
year.
What I said. Like they didn't overly monetize it. It sounds like because like
no, but they do gate all the customization. They do gate all the customization, all the customization. They do gate that behind a $30 tier, and I think that's the part where it's a little sketchy.
You see them trying to kind of grab a bigger piece of the pie.
There's also no server browser.
There's no server browser?
There is no server browser.
I personally hate the war on server browsers. I really dislike that in any multiplayer game right now. But
the clubs is what is meant to replace that. So, but it buries the content a little bit. It took me a while to find the servers that I wanted to because there is no search for it. You got to search for a club which can have a different name. I can't search for full speed or whatever, right? I have to search by club name. And the club that I found, Evo, that's the one that has Evo is based on I think it's like a different sort of set of mods and stuff. So it's a known name in it. And that one has the full speed tracks that all the Germans play. It has the technical tracks that all the French people play.
Right.
So, I'm generalizing nationalities here, but this is true. You look at the leaderboards. This is how it breaks down usually.
There are servers that are specifically for Germans and French people. Like it's not new in game.
Yeah.
But like, so I just keep thinking like if this game got the treatment that Blizzard showed with Overwatch, and I can kind of get it on Blizzard's side too. Like Blizzard didn't have community-made maps, and in their opinion, I think their decision was they didn't want community maps because they were so strict on their art style that they felt that everything had to be maintained a certain level and certain quality, and they thought that and probably rightly so that the community wouldn't be able to hit the art level that that Blizzard has. But I think they they grossly overestimated their ability to iterate with that art style, because this comes in any production. The higher the art bar, the lower number of iterations that you have on that level or asset, because it takes so much time to bring it to that level that it's hard for you to iterate to like make changes. Whereas the community, because most of the community apps start off looking like complete dog shit, to be honest, but they're focusing on all the gameplay, and then that comes afterwards. And they have, it's how much time does one developer have versus, let's say, one otaku game nerd that wants to like build a level. Like we've seen people in the community put thousands of hours. In the Smash community, we had someone quit their job for 6 months to make a mod that no one asked for, but everyone loves. But people do that in the community, and I think that's something that most big studios, for some reason or another, are scared to harness it and are scared to give more power to that community.
Yeah, and to me, that's like the quintessential game design. That's where the passion for creating games is born from, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's back in the day. I was building maps in Far Cry, right?
Oh yeah.
When I was like 12. That's what got me into game design. I was building tracks in Trackmania. I loved building stuff. These people that go out on their limb and they make their stuff, these are people that will go on to make video games professionally. That's where the passion is born. Right? Without user generated tools, you never discover that passion. You never realize the joy of having someone, hey, play this, tell me what you think. And be like, well, this could be better. And okay, hold on. I'll make it better.
Well, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
As a game, did you go to game design school, or did you go to school for something else? What
I
did you go to school for?
I went. My degree is for computer science.
Okay, good. So I don't want to shit on your degree. I just want to give a warning to anyone who's listening to this. Listen, if you are going to school for game design, you're getting ripped off. You need to reconsider what you want to spend your money into, because game design is like, all the game designers who are out there doing it have done it themselves. Like you're talking about, they're making their own maps. They're doing it because there's so many tools out there to do it yourself already. And the ones that I know in the industry that are successful are the ones that did it for whatever reason. Maybe they were a programmer and then their studio didn't have enough people and they were the one responsible for it and they grew into that role. But no, you can't just learn the mechanics. This is what I see from people who don't play games making game decisions. I see it all the time. They don't play the game, but they try to study it from a theoretical level, and it's like those armchair generals that don't know what the battlefield's actually like because they just theorize it on paper. It's the same thing for games. Like if you don't play the game and you can't actually feel the emotion about whether, like you're talking about the stress or whatnot, like how are you gonna make a good game? And that's what I kind of see that becoming more and more prevalent as the bigger your studio gets. You get this idea that you can make these right decisions from higher up, right? From people that are like more disconnected from the gameplay because there's more hierarchy and the studio is bigger. But then the problem is there's more people that are involved that don't play games. Even just look at the art side of it. Most artists, like I would say a lot of artists in our game studio or in general game studios play games, but there's not all of them. Not for the amount that you would think that's on a dev team, right?
It definitely becomes on big AAA studios that you have. We'll definitely have more wider variety in this, but also on smaller indie side of studios, there's a lot of artists that don't play games. Yeah.
They're there just to like kind of clock in their work. They're more artists for art side than game side.
I've been at studios where none of the people in programmer roles or art roles had played many games before.
Right? I know that's very true.
And so eventually surprising. All those people, because the company had pivoted right to make games, and that company pivoted to games, and eventually all those people that hadn't been interested in games before quickly saw that this wasn't going to be a quick cash grab thing and it's going to be something of passion. They all left. And that studio became incredibly different and so much better when we hired people that loved games and loved playing games and understood, at least on an emotional level, because you feel it. Everyone feels it when they play a game. They know when it's good, right?
Oh yeah.
What you go to school and learn, or what you get a book and read, like I did. I read a bunch of like game design books while I was studying my degree because I knew this was what I wanted to do. Yeah. There was a lot of fundamental things that you learn. Well, why is this fun? Why is this fun? Yeah. What are metrics? What are specific things that a player can expect? What is the logic and the science behind that? There's a lot you can learn on that. But if you don't have that emotional, why is this good? Why am I having so much time? Why do I feel this tension when I'm going 300 miles per hour on this track? What is the specific way that this is laid out that gives me that feeling? If you don't experience that for yourself, you don't understand why video games are such a powerful medium, nor what makes them truly good.
Yeah, you don't understand how you can replicate that feeling if you can't feel it yourself.
Yeah.
And that was all just to say that the community, for some reason, and this isn't the same in all industries, but the community in games is very good at making good levels and content for games. This isn't 100%. The same in all industry. Like, it's not like you can do this for the art industry where we can go out and be like, hey, you guys can make your own meshes. And like, sometimes it works, but the most part, because of how technical it is, it's quite like ineffective. But for some reason, the people in the gaming community, eventually the expertise comes out and they're able to like do something that's actually quite hard inside a studio to do, which is make like a strong gameplay core in for most studios, but they're able to do that in the community side because they had so many more people and so much more time to kind of iterate on it over there.
It's the thing. Iteration makes games. Iteration makes fun gameplay.
It really does.
And that's that feedback loop, right? That's
like if you look at Dota, one of the most successful games of all time right now. Like where did that start? It started off with like maps in Warcraft 3.
Battle Royale as well.
Exactly.
Start out with a mod with a mod for a military sim.
All of our best games have come from most likely community innovations. Even like there's so many we talked about Dota. It came from a map to a mod to its own standalone games.
Yeah. Did you know that Dota mod for Warcraft was not the first Dota?
Was it a Warcraft 2 game or mod or something?
Someone mentioned this to me the other day, or I heard it on a podcast. But there was a game that was like Defense of the Ancients, and it was called something else.
Oh.
And that's what Defense of the Ancients was based on, and it blew my mind.
That could be possible. What do I feel? It was a Warcraft map though, right? Like it was on the Warcraft.
Defense of the Ancients, Dota originally was a map for Warcraft 3.
Oh,
but the game mode itself, existed before that. Even still, before Icy Frog made that.
I wonder if it was a StarCraft map.
You know what? I think
that would be hilarious.
It might have been. We can search this and put this in like the patch notes of the podcast.
Yeah, put it in when we upload the video.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find it really interesting, and it's like this is what I kind of like when I mentioned a while back about the way Valorant has been handling their community, which I find more positive, is that they're waiting to see what the community does. They still have the stranglehold on the maps, which I think is definitely a limitation, but at least they're allowing the tournaments to kind of grow more organically. So I do think that there should be some sort of, they should take a lesson out of Trackmania, and there are other games that are just purely community driven, like Minecraft, like we mentioned, is another one. Or what was that game I can't remember right now. I just saw Soldier Boy playing it. SRSS. It's forget it. I'm not gonna remember it in time. But yeah, there's a lot of community games.
Yeah. And kind of props to Ubisoft for letting Nadeo kind of do their own thing, even if they got rid of the server browser. Add it back.
Listen, I think it's actually quite a big deal to see a company a smaller
like the publisher look at this and say like, oh, you guys have a very good thing going, we're gonna buy you and put it on our store, but you do what you think is best here. And probably they had some sort of stipulation along the way. But so many parts of it feel broken in the way that Trackmania normally is broken.
Janky, you mean?
Like just janky stuff that you're just used to because you've been playing Trackmania for so long.
Yeah.
That a lot of new players will go.
Bugs, right? Huh? It's like playing a Bethesda game and having
bugs. Yeah. And it's still like the team added so many new fun stuff. They added ice. They added boosters that make your car fly. They make your car like magnetized to the ground. All these tools that people are making really cool maps with now. There's like bobsled tracks where they turn off your engine and you have to have enough speed in order to get up the ice hill. There's one where it flips you upside down and then magnetizes your booster, so you're flying upside down while players cross over you and the other way, and you're trying to make it cross. There's really cool stuff that, because they added these new mechanics in, that are so much crazier and they feel broken.
It feels like Mario Maker, right? Like when they just gave you all these tools and it's like, hey, what do you want to do with them?
But there's something, you need to play these tracks, and like just the feel of it is so different from the official maps, but it's just the same mechanics, and it just feels broken in surprising and exciting ways to see.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's good on them for like enabling that stuff and making a really good editor where that stuff is possible. And hopefully there'll be support for you to add your own meshes into it, because people have made some amazing maps.
Yeah,
in Trackmania 2 before.
I had no idea. Well. It's so funny. I didn't realize that it was a new one. I thought you were doing a retrospective of the current.
No. This is something that I'm playing every day now. I'm doing my tracks, playing on the server, chatting with people.
Okay, so time to move on to our new segment of the show, the anything segment, right?
The anything segment. the what's going on in your life right now, Ken and
Yeah,
Louise.
like what do you want to talk about? So we wanted to add a little part where we just got a chance to talk about subjects that we hadn't prepared. Maybe something happened recently in gaming that we didn't get a chance to talk about, or just like personally excited about. What do you have?
Okay, so I've been playing a lot. But I've also been watching a lot. I am getting really much into old samurai movies in preparation for Ghost of Tsushima.
I just opened this article, how Ghost of Tsushima teamed up with Akira Kurosawa's estate for the new cinematic mode. Is that what you wanted? Did you see that at all?
No,
Do you know who Akira Kurosawa is?
Yes.
If you're watching?
Yes. Fun fact. I did film study for a year.
Oh, hey, then you definitely know Akira Kurosawa.
I definitely know Akira Kurosawa.
This guy is like godfather of cinema.
I feel spoiled like when watching some of these movies because I was not watching Akira Kurosawa's movies first. I did watch Seven Samurai first. I hadn't seen Seven Samurai. I watched Seven Samurai. I'm like, wow, that's a good movie. It feels like a good movie, and I watch it. And I watched some other stuff from that period, and I'm like,
it's a terrible.
There are so many things I took for granted in Seven Samurai that people around that time weren't doing. Like the close camera cuts, the faces, just the emotion, the expression, the highly defined character traits, the cuts that he uses to denote the passage of time, the passage of events, the long slow shots.
I remember
stuff that just didn't exist.
I remember watching Seven Samurai, which is amazing. It was so incredible to me that how well it flowed. Because, like you're saying, you watch other films during that era, and it's molasses.
Yeah.
Like, they struggle to get through sentences and to change scenes naturally, where Akira was employing so many cinema techniques that you learned as fundamentals nowadays at the very beginning.
And then I watched Hidden Fortress, and then I saw, like, every single scene transition is a wipe. And I'm like, oh... Star Wars wasn't the first.
Yeah. I mean, Star Wars so heavily influenced by Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah, George Lucas specifically references Hidden Fortress as a big influence. So I'm watching that one now. I'm halfway through it.
Oh, nice. This is very exciting that they're teaming up with the Kurosawa estate. I don't know what the Akira Kurosawa estate really has to offer in terms of if they have like some sort of studio or something
one
like that.
Blu-ray copy of Seven Samurai.
Probably. But that's so exciting because like people don't realize that the effect of Akira Kurosawa, he made everything that you know as westerns probably comes a lot from like
Fistful of Dollars. Famously, he said, this is a fine film, but this is my film.
Yep. He's like, I've seen that before. I made that film.
Yeah.
All the tropes of the bandits coming in to hurt the Mexican farmers or local farmers is the exact same trope. That's
government manipulation, like affecting the lower class and them having to rise up and rebel against a higher power. Yeah, so, very common theme in a lot of samurai movies. In fact,
I wonder how much of that feel they'll get in Ghost of Tsushima.
I wonder, right? That's why I'm doing this research beforehand, because they say it's very inspired. And immediately, one thing that I notice is they're focusing a lot on wind, right? And I see a lot of this in the samurai movies that I'm watching. The wind billowing through the glass, rippling through their robes. This affected Ghost of Tsushima so much that even their photo mode, the wind is still enabled. So everything is freeze, but you see the rustling of the wind, the tree swaying in the wind. So much of it like in the environment, the innate tension in that final climactic showdown, which again, coming from like westerns, a whole standoff where they're staring each other down. Sanjuro, near the end of that movie, there's like that standoff with just two guys staring at each other for a good long time before one of them like draws, but the other guy is faster because he's the good guy and he quickly swipes and the blood shoots out. Again, Akira Kurosawa.
I wonder. So I wonder how well those techniques will translate to video games.
I know
it's so hard for games to do the cinematic effect. I think even the best games out there that do it right now only scratch the surface of cinematic quality in movies just because of the nature of the medium, right? And you played The Witcher 2 and 3, I believe.
1, 2,
right?
and 3.
Yeah. So one of the things that they tried to do was to have cinematic cameras, but it's hard in an open kind of world where you can talk to anybody in different scenarios and stuff. So they would set up pre-made camera angles and try to cut to them, but they look so awkward because in a movie, you need like that's something that you really need like a full handmade control over. Whereas in a game, so much of it's dependent on the player. I wonder, how do they translate that cinematic quality?
Again, this is the thing that you're touching on, something I think is very important, where a lot of people say there's a lot of influence of movies on games, right? And you see a lot of praise heaped upon stuff like Heavy Rain or I don't know, like The Last of Us before, saying like, oh,
Walking Dead.
Why you praising this? Yeah, Walking Dead as well. Why are you praising this game when it's basically like an interactive movie? And again, it's back when we have that conversation about The Last of Us 2, and I said the thing that empowers the story the most is the fact that you're playing it, right? And I think this is something that absolutely failed Red Dead Redemption 2 for me as a video game, not as an experience. I love Red Dead Redemption 2, the story, the interactive medium, but as a video game, I think it is a bit of a failure. I know that's a strong word, but that is.
But you feel it didn't harness the gameplay side of it to utilize with this.
Exactly, and I don't think that games need to do that, right? And that is so crucial to me to express, is that games don't. They should take influences from movies in the sense of how you can communicate a story through implication. Like you cut a scene from like a bottle, a half drunk bottle of alcohol, and then you cut to a guy just sitting on a couch like this, and you can determine, oh, he's an alcoholic.
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's scenes you can communicate with that, but
yeah.
Games can do so much more through gameplay, through making you feel things through that. And again, the big thing that I always want to hammer home is emotion, right? They don't need to expressly capture the shots of samurai movies and Ghost of Tsushima to make it work, but it needs to evoke that feeling, right?
Yeah.
It needs to have the wind, right? The wind blowing through the trees. I don't need a frame that frames it. Yeah. But I need to feel that emotion. I need to feel the pauses between comments. I need to feel the anticipation before I slash someone in half, or I get slashed in half.
So in Seven Samurai, there's this one moment where I can't remember his name. He plays Yojimbo though. He's the big
Toshiro Minafune.
What's it? Yeah.
Toshiro Minafune.
Yeah, exactly. So his character dies, right? And the samurai are mourning it, right? So cinematically, to express that emotion is going to be significantly different than how do they express it in a game. I think that's the thing, is that it's not like when they say they're working with the Akira Kurosawa estate, it makes me excited, but it also makes me wary because it's not going to be a one-for-one translation. They need to find something. They need to essentially, it's like when you're remaking a old and classic for a modern day movie, right? Like how many of those have worked? And let's use some good examples and a bad example. Let's say, what is that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he goes to Mars? Total Recall. That's
Total Recall. This is a bad example, right?
This is the bad example.
Okay.
Right? So the original
I
movie,
love Colin Farrell, but that movie is garbage.
The original movie is stupid, but it was like, an awesome action movie. Like, for that time,
absolutely.
it's so good, right?
Absolutely.
And then the remake essentially does what we're worried.
Colin Farrell
they took
remake,
all these
right?
kind of elements and they're like, this is what made the original good, and we'll try to stamp it on this new one. Whereas let's look at a successful, in my opinion, is the Jumanji franchise, at least in the original series and then the new one, where they took what made the original fun, which is essentially this idea of this wild world coming to life and pulling people in and having them to
who are totally
figure it
unprepared
out
for it
and deal with each other. They're unprepared. And they took the goodness of it, but they took different tools and elements to make that new feeling, right? Rather than trying to take the same elements and then expecting the same result.
And they put Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in it.
Exactly. It helps. It helps to have Gillian Anderson there as well. Like, it doesn't hurt. And so that's what I see for Ghost of Tsushima. It's like, if they want to try to use Kurosawa's, maybe it's just a thing where they just want to use his name, but if they want to pull in what he kind of represented in movies or what made his movies great, they're going to need a much better understanding of what what his movies were all about. And maybe they do, because you see a lot of people take strong inspiration. The Mandalorian is heavily influenced by Akira Kurosawa, and all because it's a Western,
because it's heavily
right?
influenced by Westerns, right?
Yeah. So I'm super excited. That game has slowly increased my interest over time. When it was first announced, I was like, oh, a cool samurai game, but I do like the art that's coming out of it. It looks super comic booky somehow, like, even though it's almost like, it feels like an ink painting, but it's still 3D. There's something about the way that they're deciding to not show certain elements of the environment. If you look at it, they have this very stark foreground, and then they have a very beautiful, like, ghostly background that I've seen in most of their gameplay fights, right? So whereas in a game like Skyrim, you have a realistic distribution of mid-ground, foreground, and background elements, and you're always fighting, whereas this one, it feels like you're on a stage, almost like a it looks like a movie set kind of thing, right? Like,
that's so
it looks like
interesting.
it's set up to be very stylized. So I'm interested to see if they utilize that somehow. It could be an amazing, like, combination.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting that you're saying that, because that's something I totally didn't notice at all. To me, what stuck out the most to me in how it leveraged samurai movies is they always talk about the lethality of the katana, right? From a gameplay sense. What stood out the most to me when they were talking about that and really backed it up for me is that there's difficulty modes in that game. None of it affects the health of the enemies.
Right, it just
affects,
right?
It affects their aggression and how their AI behaves in combat with you.
I do like that a lot. So for those unfamiliar, the whole how did you describe it? The deadliness of the sword that you were just talking about?
Lethality of the katana.
Yeah, the lethality of the katana. So a lot of people don't realize that, like, samurai fighting, back in the height of samurai fighting,
The Sengoku Jedi.
yeah, it wasn't revolving around clashing swords like you see in movies. They were all revolved around one or two moves that would incapacitate your opponent or go for the kill. So it wouldn't be like they would, because the swords were super sharp, but in order to be able to be that sharp, they had to be super brittle, because they'd be super hard, right? So the more you clashed it, if you clashed it once, it would probably ruin the edge of the samurai sword, and you would have to get it fixed just once. So a lot of, if you actually looked at the history of it, like, for example, a lot of strategy was just revolved around cutting the thumb of the person.
Oh.
And if you cut their thumb, they can't hold their sword two-handed, and their fight's practically over. Right? So, or a lot of it would be they would hold their sword down and use the opponent's rushing on motion when they come to strike you as to just impale them, right? Like, so that's where the idea of the lethality goes, because samurai fights were about, like, you imagine yourself in the life of a samurai at the height of it, is that you are a warrior trained from night and day for this one moment, and the moment is one move. It's a rock, paper, scissors fight, but everything is on the line, and that's the lethality of samurai fights that I think that they're talking about. So if they bring it into this game, it would be really, really interesting, because then it's almost like you're playing Dark Souls on hard mode, and you can't get hit once or something, right? Like, it feels like you have to make every mistake correct, but that's also super punishing. So I wonder how
they do say it works both ways, right? They say it works both ways. It's, you are extremely vulnerable to other enemies' weapons, but you also kill people in one or two hits. It's very Bushido Blade in that sort of sense.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So I'm really interested. It's a game that I haven't heard much about. I don't know any publication that got hands-on with it before they got review copies. It's kind of weird, and that's usually a bad sign.
That is kind of a bad sign that they won't show gameplay. That's always kind of a worrisome sign.
The only gameplay they really showed was the state of play, and then they've had interviews talking about their methodology and stuff beyond that. But I really hope it's good, because it's
exciting.
I'm beginning to become very invested in this whole. Again, I'm very new to this whole samurai thing, right? I haven't seen all those movies until now. I'm watching them, and I'm really enjoying them. So now I'm slowly building up this investment. I'm like, Ghost of Tsushima, you better make good on this stuff.
Don't get ruined by high expectations. That's what I'll say. Like you said, the gameplay isn't out. I can't trust anything anymore.
The gameplay is
too many times by
games.
Right? So I don't know. I'm kind of waiting to see how that goes.
Do you also get the point where at a certain point you don't care if a game is good or not? You just have to play it just so you can talk about it?
I would say a game has to hit a certain level of cultural significance for me to do that. You know? Like The Last of Us definitely seemed to hit that mark. But instead of playing it, I watched it. Like, you know, I just needed to experience it, essentially, or get some sort of semblance. It's like watching a Star Wars movie, even though you don't want to watch it just because you want to talk about it.
It's so much easier to do with movies, though, because that's 2-hour contribution of your life.
Yeah.
With
and
games
are
it's
hard,
like,
and not everyone wants to beat a game. And also, games can be frustrating, too, so not everyone wants to finish a game.
Yeah. I've started to play games on easy, games that I don't, that I just want to see the end of. That's how I played Far Cry New Dawn, because I wanted this to be like a fun little diversion. I wasn't really invested in the core combat of it and felt it wasn't the point of the game, so I just started playing on easy. I just felt I had nothing to prove to anyone.
I don't think I can't get myself to do that anymore.
No,
like I feel like, at least for me, I haven't yet. Maybe The Last of Us should have changed it for me, but I haven't yet played a game, any games that have had such good story that I ever wanted to give up any of the gameplay side of it. Like you were talking about with Red Dead Redemption, you know, like my bar is kind of so when I play a game, it's going to be mainly for the gameplay. Like the gameplay element already has to interest me, so otherwise I won't jump into it in the first place. Maybe later on a story will be so good that I have to hear it. But there's no premise to me that's so interesting that I can sit through mediocre gameplay right now.
Yeah.
So like I also, and by that gameplay side, I also mean that I personally like to enjoy games on harder difficulty. I like the idea of it. I want to hit a range where it's hard enough so that when I beat it, I feel rewarded for beating it. Right. I don't personally like beating a game where maybe I have too much resources and then I can kind of like relax and make a bunch of mistakes and then run through it. You know, it's just the way I personally play. So I can't get myself to like play games just for the story, even though I really want to find out the story.
Yeah.
Like The Witcher, I still haven't beaten yet because I keep playing it on a harder difficulty, but it makes me every time I die, I don't want to restart the game. So it's a bit problem for me. I can see why you do that because I do want to experience more games than I have time for now.
Yeah, it's becoming a problem. Back in the day when I was younger, you had to be more selective because you played like you got one new game every month and a half or something, right? And then that was the game that you were just gonna beat 10 times.
Yeah, you better beat that game.
Yeah, and it better be good.
Or you were like me and you rented a game from Blockbuster and you had a week.
Yeah.
Or if it was a good game, you had 2 or 3 days. 2 or 3 days if it was a good game. That was brutal.
My parents never let me rent games because they said it would influence you to want to rush through it more on the weekends and not do your homework.
I mean, it's definitely true.
That is true.
I'll tell you a little story. One time, I asked my parents for a game, a Nintendo 64 game called Jet Force Gemini.
Hell yeah.
Game's irrelevant.
Hell yeah.
I essentially snuck under the Christmas tree. I opened the game.
No.
I took out the game. I closed the package. I closed the present. I played the game to death by the time that I had to open it. And then when Christmas Day came around, I was like, oh my God, Jet Force Gemini. And I tossed it in because my mom wants to play. And it's like, there's a save file that has like 20 hours on it.
Oh,
already.
no.
It's like halfway through the game.
You're lucky though. Your parents play games with you. That's nice. My parents never play games with me.
Yeah, the games were a big part of me growing up. It essentially like filled up the time that I had from being like a immigrant kid that didn't have any friends.
No.
So for me, I personally
what are you up to, Ken? What's going on?
Well, okay, so I've been looking for a card game to play.
A card game?
Yeah, I used
Digital
to play
or
Hearthstone.
real?
Pardon?
Digital or real?
Digital. I don't want to collect cards ever. I used to play Magic and Pokemon. Like it's a money sink. It's too much.
I'm gonna talk to you about living card games at another time, and then you'll
okay.
And then that's the conversation we can have another time.
Essentially, I'm looking for a card game digitally. I used to play Hearthstone, but I eventually uninstalled my Blizzard account because personal reason, didn't want to deal with it.
Okay.
So I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh.
No, what?
This game, but I've been playing it. I can't play it competitively because this game is probably I've watched the competitive side, and it's not a game that I care to dive into. And it was the same
is it
for
like
Hearthstone.
Melee?
I didn't want to.
Is it a really old game that hasn't been patched and people just figured out their own little secret strats?
Yeah, kind of. Like I didn't play Hearthstone the same way either. Like I played Hearthstone for just their single player like dungeon content.
Really?
I didn't care about playing multiplayer at all. Like because I know what multiplayer would entail for, and I love multiplayer games, but I know what it entails for card games, and it entails a high level of card knowledge of the entire. Like you need to know the entire kind of library of cards out there so you can properly play against them as well as assemble your deck. And I did not care about figuring out that level of complexity. What I wanted is essentially a game of chess, where I know the basic pieces. I can read the card as I go, and then just figure out as I go. I don't need to have like if chess was Hearthstone multiplayer, there would be like 700 pieces, right? And all of them would do different things slightly and blah blah blah. Whereas I like a simpler game that I can build upon. And that's what I like Yu-Gi-Oh, because it's a simple game, and I play that also just the campaign. I don't care about playing online.
Which game is this specifically?
This is Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist, because I think
Legacy of the
Duel Links
Duelist
is the newest one.
Uh-huh.
And I also didn't want to have to pay for cards, so I play the old one where I can just get the cards. It's like fake internet money or like game money, so it doesn't matter. And what I like about it is just like I need a mindless puzzle to solve sometimes. Like I feel like it helps me think, it helps me relax when I don't need to like have a very low stress but high level of thinking game, which I don't have a lot of because most of my high level of thinking games require multiplayer interactivity to add that, really strong component. I think most of single player games ultimately end up as strategy, more so than high levels of like problem solving necessarily. Like The Last of Us was a great game, but it's mainly strategy about where to get around and knowing where the NPCs are eventually and where stuff is. Whereas like
more reactionary.
There's obviously reactionary elements, but like let's say you take a game like Counter-Strike where it's literally all about the other person that adds this element of where there's some strategy, but then you can get straight out played, right? That adds a lot of thinking side to it where you need to figure out what to do and all your actions, but it's high stress. Like we were talking about, and at some point I don't want a high stress game. I want a super, super low stress single player. Maybe I'm playing Super Mario or something. Like that's the kind of game that I was looking for, but in a card game.
Yeah.
And Yu-Gi-Oh is it. It's silly. And the show is so stupid, like it's. But I grew up watching it, and it's like Dragon Ball Z. It's like ridiculous, but you love it for some reason.
Sure.
That's how I feel about
Sure.
Yu-Gi-Oh. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I actually don't have that many games that I'm playing right now besides Valorant. And
should get you into Trackmania.
I would be down. What's funny about Trackmania is that I played it at a LAN with some friends, and that was so much fun. We played LAN.
It's good stuff.
Just the 8 of us racing each other.
Come join my server. I'm gonna show you the server. We're gonna get you in there. We're gonna get you to listen to some really bad
some
technical
hardcore
tracks.
techno beats.
Yeah, and then just race around the world. Whoa, hold on. We're doing a podcast. We're talking about a racing game. I need to do this. There's I listen to a podcast called Shift F1.
Okay.
It's a podcast about speedy race cars.
Okay.
Run by Danny O'Dwyer and Drew Scanlon. Danny O'Dwyer you may know from the YouTube videos No Clip. And at the end they go through all the races, and he does a little thing when he talks about all the races that are happening around the world. So I'm gonna
like real races, real life.
Yeah,
races?
real life races. It's a Formula One podcast, and he does a little thing that I'm gonna do for you right now. Hold on. He says that it is time to race around the world. Yeah.
Ooh, smooth.
Yeah. I think I did pretty good there.
Appreciate that. Yeah, that's great. One thing is interesting is we should talk about at some point the interesting crossover for F1 and video games.
Yes. There's
Right?
a
That's so
Lando Norris
fascinating.
Trackmania club. And it's
That's the
all
most
tracks
epic
based on real Formula One tracks. There are 5 laps each, and I'm terrible at them.
But it's so interesting that that's such a real world, like that's the most parallel skill set to have with the actual sport. The game mode is the actual, like playing NHL.
It's track
like,
knowledge,
there
car
was a tournament where
knowledge. Yeah,
NHL players,
I guess I get what you mean.
Yeah, like there was a tournament where NHL players played NHL. I'm like, you guys don't know how to play you guys aren't game. You're not gamers. You're athletes. Okay, I get it. But this one,
because you control the entire
driving
team,
is-
right?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting.
It's fun seeing the Formula One drivers actually playing like iRacing and stuff like that with wheels and like expensive setups because
Yeah.
they're all millionaires, and
Yeah.
and then
they all
be
have, like,
good.
the full setup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. Lando
Okay,
Norris,
well, that's pretty much it
Lando
for
Norris
me.
has
Do you have
Drake
anything
Fish now.
else?
No, I gotta go and eat my dinner, and
That's right.
I guess now we're switching our schedule a little bit. So we're gonna
yeah,
record.
so,
We're gonna record on Mondays, right? Hopefully.
Mhm. Yeah, hopefully, mostly. Unfortunately, I have some scheduling problems that might shift it over to a Wednesday or Monday, but
That's when
we'll
the
keep
live
you
show will
updated,
be.
yeah.
And we're always gonna upload on. I guess we won't upload. If it's on Monday, we'll upload it on Tuesday. If it's on Wednesday, we'll upload it on Thursday.
We might also just come up with a regular uploading schedule, like we might do it every Sunday or something like that. It'll depend,
Yeah,
but we'll try to make it regular so everyone can kind of follow on track and easily.
Yeah, still working it out. And as always, keep sending in those mails at beyondthepixelpodcast@gmail.com. beyondthepixelpodcast@gmail.com. I will probably make a shorter one at some point as like an alias. Like BTP mail, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Figure it out. But other than that, Ken.
Don't forget to follow me at KenHaas6
Yes.
so far. I'm on Twitter. If you want my Instagram, it's all my art, and then Twitter is just for general stuff, as well as my Twitch. You can follow me there.
Yep. If you want to follow my Twitch, you're already on it. So there you go. It's easy. Songs, Adrian Talents, always amazing. Press start. You can follow him. You can follow me at LFSandrin. And then us, you always find us here again. Beyond the Pixel.
See you guys.